Alrighty, lumberjacks, welcome back to another Greenhorn's Guide to Logging and Forestry. So today we're going to be looking at the dangle head felling processor. So we just have an attachment machine, and then we have this Waratah dangle head processor. Now I've had a few people asking from the previous videos what the purpose of the dangle head is versus using the fixed head. Now you can use either the fixed head or the dangle head to do both operations of either felling trees or processing off the ground. The dangle head is just a different way to do things. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut ourselves out a little bit of a path here for our next video, which will be on forwarding. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop in this bad boy. So this head, being different from the fixed head, does not have the ability to tilt back and forth. So if you use your right joystick and you're moving it left and right, you have no tilt function. This is a head that always stays pretty much level with the ground while you're operating. It always stays kind of at a balanced point. The difference on this machine is it does have the ability to tilt the head up into a felling position and tilt the head down into a position to process trees off the ground. So that's kind of the difference from a dangle head. Now, as far as productivity, I do find if you do get used to a dangle head when you're processing logs off the ground, like we were doing in the earlier processing video, this does become much faster than using a fixed head, simply because you're not readjusting your tilt all the time, because this thing's always staying at a level ground for grabs. So you know, it's just one less control you have to operate, which is something that increases your productivity overall. So we're just going to go on a little adventure here. Now I'm going to cut these to 5 meters. So using a dangle head as a feller, so basically what felling is you're knocking the trees down similar to the feller buncher. The difference is you actually process the trees on the spot as opposed to leaving them in bunches and dragging them back to the landing for processing. So in order to get things felled, basically you just want to make sure your claws are open, your head is turned on by pushing B. There we go. Now you want to actually wrap the tree right around... I have to buy my land here, my bad. Always remember to buy your land if you're getting that message. So you want to actually wrap the claw around the tree like so. So if I get out here and show you, you want to actually have it lined up, well, hopefully a little straighter than that, but so you can drop it, make sure it's basically as low as you can get it on the tree, so it's at a good cut angle, and make sure it's within the claws. Then what you can actually do is actually grip the tree right off the bat without cutting, and then you either push X to cut right away, or there's a little bit more of an advanced technique. So if you want to knock a tree down successfully, you need to put a little bit of pressure on the tree so it knows which way to fall. Because if I just cut this tree the way it's standing, it'll just stay upright in the grapple. But if I want that tree to fall down, especially if it's a larger tree, you want to put a little bit of pressure on it so you can actually lower your head onto the tree like that while it's gripped. So I'll show you an example here. So once we get it hooked up, we grip the tree with our tongs there, and then we put pressure on it by putting it against the tree. So I put full pressure all the way down. So basically you just hold down your tilt the head button for like 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Now when you go to make your cut, it'll knock that tree down. That's one way to kind of preload the pressure of the tree so that it falls down properly. Then you can just process like normal. I usually make a pile off to my left-hand side, and your choice whether you want to put the tops in there. In my case, I'm just going to turf them off to the side here. And then lift your head up again. Now on these smaller trees, you don't really need to preload them with pressure like the way I was doing, because they are very small trees and there's not much weight to them. So you can usually cut them, drop them, pile them, and it's not a big deal. Now if you decide to go after some of the bigger trees, then sometimes they fall at wacky angles if you don't preload with some pressure on it. And that's just kind of the way the head was designed. But it's very, very, very similar to real life, the way this head works, having full control of it, which is nice. So I'm going to make a little trail here because, like I said, in our next video, we're going to be covering forwarders. So we're going to make ourselves a little mini forwarder trail. I'm just going to show you some more techniques with this thing. So for smaller trees, and I don't recommend this for bigger trees because it can get really glitchy, And in real life, I don't think you'd ever want to do it with a big tree. But on smaller trees, and I've seen this in real life, so I know it's something that does happen, an operator will cut a tree, and again, small trees, not big trees. So they'll grip it, cut a tree, they'll leave it in an upright position so that they can rotate the tree over to where they want. Then they actually rotate the grapple like this and drop it. So then you're lined back up with your pile. That's another technique you can use for felling. In real life, you would only want to do that on really, really thin trees. And I've seen some operators do it on very, very thin stuff. On big stuff, it would probably wreck the head. You wouldn't be able to do that. So we're just going to kind of keep rolling along here. So this is an example of a big tree. So I'm actually going to cut this little guy out of here too first. So cut that one. Whoops. And if it doesn't cut, you're operating too quickly. There we go. So we're going to throw that over here. And like I said, there's a big tree right here on my right. That would be a good example for preloading pressure. So this one, like I said, being much larger tree, you want to make sure you have that, but you want to make sure you add pressure onto it. So I've pushed my my head down, and when I say that, I mean I hold this down for 3 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, it drops the head. 1, 2, 3, it raises the head. So now if I put that same pressure on this tree, so if I go 1, 2, 3, and I cut it, it'll now knock that tree in that direction. So it's very helpful for cutting. If you do leave the head sedentary, meaning you don't put any pressure on the tree, sometimes it can kick back on you, especially if you're on a hill or any kind of weird terrain. Sometimes the tree will bounce back at you, which is not preferable for what you're doing. So there we go. With this head particularly, you also have the ability to pick up stuff off the ground if you need to. So if you don't like where your pile is, you can kind of grip it. It's a little tight for organizing, so you got to be careful you don't crush all your logs. But you definitely can get quite a few in that grab. And we're just going to move this pile back just for example purposes. We'll pile that there. And like I said, being able to lift and lower the head allows you to have that ability. On the in-game stuff, you can't do that because the head automatically goes back up. But I've removed that feature on this one so that it does fall appropriately. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go cut a couple more here. Like I said, I do want to make a bit of a trail for ourselves. Cutting out trails and stuff is kind of usually the purpose for forwarding, because then you leave a nice little pile of wood that you can go chase after. I use it generally for road building, but I have seen lots of guys who clear cut entire maps using just forwarders as well. We're gonna kind of go this way. I'm trying to avoid the giant trees because they're a bit of a specialty cutting those down. So let's go here. We'll grab this one, and we'll throw that kind of off to the side here. And like I said, you can clear cut if you want, but we're just building kind of a wacky little road. We're going to get that over there. And I don't know which way I'm going. I totally didn't plan out my road, which you probably should do, but that's okay. So there we go. And like I said, as far as like functionality, you can do all of this with the fixed head as well. You don't have to use the dangle style feller for this. You can use the other one. It's just this is a little more effective for falling. Oh, see, I didn't preload the tree and it almost went in the wrong direction there. And if you guys haven't noticed, and if you don't know, because if you're brand new to it, this head always will cut in the direction you face it. So let's give you a quick example of that after we cut this tree up here. So it's kind of like a directional felling head. So because it's always falling in this direction, you want to make sure you fall your tree in the direction away from where you want to cut. So for instance, like I said, if I wanted this tree to pile over here, I would actually turn the head all the way around and cut it from this side. And then as I drop it, I'd be able to process into a pile right here. So you do have to keep kind of an attention to where you're falling trees if you're trying to make like a nice little, you know, like we're kind of building a little bit of a road here. So if you want to keep a nice little piling kind of system, you do need to pick your directions. We're going to try to fall this tree. I don't know how it's going to go. I haven't cut a lot of these big trees with this processor, so So for these big trees, I honestly wouldn't even close the grapples. I would just leave the grapple wide open because they almost fill the... Well, you can take a look here. They almost fill the entire grapple. I mean, you could close it a bit if you wanted to, I guess, but yeah, it'd probably be a bit glitchy. So I'm going to close it enough so I have a little bit of a grip, and I'm going to preload pressure on the tree, which is fully preloaded now. And I don't know if I'll be able to cut it or not. We'll find out. Oh, hold on here. Do I have a cut? I might not be able to cut it with this. Oh, I think I had it there. Again, these are the most difficult trees in my maps to cut down because they are big trees by popular request. Okay, there we go. So, oops. See, don't do that. So cut it, and then, yeah, I couldn't really preload that one because I didn't have a grip on it, but that's actually pretty good. That's successful. It went where I wanted it. So let's leave these all here. These big ones are a little bit more tricky to do. Now, in real life, not in this game so much, normally putting that much weight on a processor head would be quite brutal for it. It'd be almost too much for running a piece of wood that big. So what a lot of guys will do, and you don't have to do this is strictly visual for the game. In real life, it does help the hydraulics and stuff. But a lot of guys, as it's cutting, they'll actually swing the cab into the cut, so that's less pressure on the head itself. So for instance, when I run this one, I'm going to swing to the right a bit. And you can see it almost feeds the head down the log itself, and then I can just pull it over, cut it. Again, we're kind of getting to the smaller bits now, but you can totally like run it down the log kind of. It's a kind of an advanced technique, and it's not really necessary in the game at all. It doesn't do any benefit in the game unless you have a tree really, really stuck. But it's just another way that real-life processor operators run bigger trees through the heads without damaging the equipment. So, I mean, if you really want to do that, you can go right ahead. But totally not necessary if you don't want to. I'll throw that over there. And just see if I can clean up this piece here a little bit. I always try to get rid of the stumps as low as I can. I can't quite find a cut spot here. Oh, there we go. Now we got this kind of little piece in here. So there's a technique I like to do to get rid of these little pieces. So as you're processing it, I kind of shoot it like that, bloop, and shoot it over to the pile. And that's just you flicking the head while you pull the trigger to run the log, and it just goes bink and shoots it over there. Just fun little silly techniques if you're playing around. And like I said, once you get more comfortable with the equipment, and if you're using controls, oops, I can't see very good there. You guys will develop your own kind of techniques. And if you operate too quickly, like I do a lot of the time, I move things a little too quickly. Sometimes if you're moving it when you're going on a cut, like I just did, it'll actually miss the cut. So if I'm cutting a tree, make sure you're ready, you're happy. Don't move around, pull the trigger just like that. I'm just very finicky, and I sometimes move the head around while I'm working, and it fails to cut properly when you do that. So let's get rid of this. I'm just, like I said, I just want to cut a little bit of a trail here for ourselves. And you can do this on any kind of terrain, whether it's hills or, as long as you can find a place to store or stack the wood. It's all good to be a processor feller. And like I said, there's so many different techniques to logging, and I've seen so many guys do so many different ways of using all of the equipment for their own, stuff. In this case, this is just the way I do it. But again, don't feel scared to try something different. If you think it'll work, by all means. Or if you see something on a video, you're watching on YouTube of a real life logger trying something, and you think you'll be able to try it in the game, by all means, give her. So now for this tree, it's kind of at a wacky angle here, but I do want to clear it. So you can actually, like this head is fully rotational, right? So you can actually reach all the way around the backside of the tree and grip it like this. Whoop, and drop it. That was kind of a wacky drop, but it worked. The other bonus to this head is, unlike the in-game one, you can actually rotate it while it's in cut mode. On the one in-game, you are not able to rotate it while it's been cut, which is not super realistic, but this one fixes that issue, so I'll throw that one in there just for fun. Why not? Beauty. Now, one thing I did not mention on this machine, so this machine It's currently the only one I have with a fixed joint. So on my other machines, so I'm just going to drop this for a minute. On my other machines, that little black tip, I'm just going to go down here. So this little tip here, on all my other machines, this actually rotates right and left, and that's called a tilt machine, right? So you have the ability to tilt the grapple yourself manually. This one does not tilt. So you'd want to make sure if you're using a dangle head piece of equipment, whether it be this or any of the other dangle head grapples, anything, it's the best way to operate is to use one that has a fixed joint on it so that it doesn't move around. Because a lot of operators, while playing this game particularly, will accidentally, while they're pulling their boom up, they'll accidentally shift their joystick to the left a bit, and it causes that to curl. And then a lot of times it ends up curling all the way back up, and then the head does not work as properly because it's hanging at weird angles and knocking trees down not correctly. So this one's designed to work no matter how far you have extended the boom. Oops, let's get back here. I thought it was further up. So no matter how far I extend the boom out, it always stays relatively level with the ground. And whether I pull it all the way in, it stays relatively level with the ground. Obviously, if you do a full extreme extension, it's probably going to be off a bit. So it'll probably be arced up a little bit on that angle. See how it's not level? It stays off the ground a bit. So you wouldn't want to be probably processing at that kind of a range. You want it to stay kind of level. So your proper operating range would be about from here, where it sits almost perfectly level with the ground this way, up to, I don't know how close I can get it before it starts to arc again. Whoops. I think it gets pretty close. I'd say about there is when it starts to really arc again. But you wouldn't want to be felling anything that close to the cab anyway. So, and the other example I was going to give you just to show you, it is really good at ground tracking or ground grabs as well. So let's go cut down a couple more trees. Actually, we'll make a little pile here because I want to demonstrate it. Okay, so let's drop that one right there. And like I said, I'm just dropping them. I'm not actually processing these ones. And we'll drop that one right there. And I'm just going to grab some of these ones out of our way here. So yeah, I mean, you could use this as a full-on feller buncher if you really wanted to. Instead of bunching, you could process, which we've actually done in some of our multiplayer episodes when we had some missing equipment. So now, again, like I said, this does operate exactly the same as the fixed head by being able to grab the trees off the ground. So I'm just going to rotate here a little. So in order to get things to come off the ground, all you do is just make sure your head's dropped all the way and don't raise it back up again. Go in, do your grab, cut your tree, and then you process it just like we were doing in the fixed head video there for the last processing show. And then the tops you can just turf off to the side or do whatever you want. And again, for that technique, when I throw them off to the side like that, all I'm doing is turning the head off and back on again. So when you make a cut, and I'm not sure if I explained this before in the other video, right now this log is loose in the grapple. Like it's loose. I can move it around. I can grab it. But as soon as you make that first initial cut, it's just a script in the game that basically locks that tree to the head. So even if I open my claw, it's still stuck in the head. It's not going anywhere. That's just the script that's on there. So as long as you have it in that grip kind of mode for cutting, you can cut it, move it around, do whatever you want, and it's never going to come out of that grapple. But when you do get, like you said, to that end bit and you don't want it anymore, you can't just open your claw because it won't fall out. It sticks in there. So as you open your claw, you actually have to turn the head off by hitting B or your trigger. So as I throw it out, I go like this, turn the claw off and back on again. I do like a double tap on it because then what it does is it turns the head off, so it drops the log, but then I also need the head back on again when I go to grab my next log. So it goes whoop, and then now my head's actually ready to cut again because I turned it back on. And again, these are techniques that you know, if you want to develop, you can. If not, you don't have to. This is just some kind of advanced stuff that I like to do. So let's cut just a couple more trees here, and then we'll have ourselves kind of a nice little trail. I'm actually going to grab that one, and we're going to drop it right about there. I'm just going to cut up to this last little tiny tree here because I think this will be Probably more than enough wood for our forwarder testing, but it's good. That's the best part about doing these tutorials, is because I set myself up for the next episode by showing you what I'm doing in this one. It's perfect. I don't have to do any extra work. And again, these tops you can do whatever you want with. That's your call. One thing I really do like to do, and I've been doing in lots of my multiplayer videos, is when I cut the piece, if there's a bit left over, so I'll pile this nice. Now, if there's a bit left over, what I'll do is I'll actually usually go like this, and I'll drop it in the track behind me and just leave it there. So then when we come in with a forwarder, we can throw a forestry grinder on it, and while we're driving and picking up logs, we can actually be chewing up this trail of bits as opposed to having to go off track and grab those bits and pieces. So it just keeps everything a little more organized. And I always say you do not have to be as organized as all this. You can do things however you want. There's no rules. It's just about having fun. So I love to show you guys how I do stuff, and then you guys can determine how you want to do it, make your own way. You know, it's entirely relative on what you like versus what I like. So I'm going to go park this guy over here. I'm just going to leave it here because we won't have to worry about it. All right, perfect. So yeah, that's basically the operation of the dangle head with the kind of feller option. Like I said, it is really nice for knocking down trees. Again, it can be used for processing logs off the ground like we just did there. It does the exact same operation as the fixed head. It's just a different method that a lot of people wanted to try out. So yeah, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and we will catch you on the next one. See ya.